Take a close look at this face, and you're gonna feel the pain of defeat. Hey, hey, hey!
Here comes the axe, and here comes the smasher.
If you grew up watching wrestling in the late 80s or early 90s, you already know the moment that music hit, it was game over. Two men in leather, faces painted, ready to fight. Demolition. They were loud, they were mean, and for a while they were one of the most dominant tag teams in WWE history. But there's more to Demolition than just spikes and power slams. Their story has controversy, copycat claims, lineup changes, and even legal drama that kept them out of the WWE Hall of Fame for years. In 1987, the World Wrestling Federation was exploding in popularity. Hulk Hogan was on cereal boxes. The Ultimate Warrior was sprinting to the ring. And tag team wrestling, it was absolutely thriving. That was when the WWF introduced a new team, Demolition. Wearing studded black leather, face paint, and metal masks, they looked like pure chaos. And when they entered the ring, they didn't waste time with flashy moves or comedy gimmicks. They hit hard, they tagged often, and they destroyed teams. They weren't just another tag team. They were built to intimidate, and it worked. Demolition quickly rose through the ranks. They crushed teams like the Killer Bees, the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldogs, and Strikeforce. In March of 1988 at WrestleMania 4, they beat Strikeforce to win their first WWF Tag Team Championship. And from there, they didn't look back. They went on to hold the titles for 478 days, the longest reign in WWF history at the time. And the fans, they ate it up. But as they got more popular, the criticism started to grow louder. From the very beginning, wrestling fans couldn't help but feel like they'd seen something like Demolition before. There was just something about their look. The black leather gear, the face paint, the intense, no-nonsense attitude. It reminded a lot of people of another famous tag team, the Road Warriors, also known as Hawk and Animal. The Road Warriors were already a huge deal in wrestling. They weren't part of the WWF at the time, but they were dominating in other wrestling promotions like the NWA and AWA. With their wild face paint, massive muscles, and those iconic spiked shoulder pads, they looked like unstoppable monsters. They had a reputation for crushing their opponents quickly and walking out like they owned the place. So when Demolition showed up in the WWF with a similar vibe, the leather, the paint, the power moves, a lot of fans jumped to the same conclusion. They thought Demolition was just a copy, a knockoff. Vince McMahon's version of the Road Warriors, made because he hadn't signed the real thing yet. Some fans even made jokes about it, saying things like, Vince saw the Road Warriors and decided to just make his own version. And honestly, you couldn't really blame them for thinking that. On the surface, the two teams did have a lot in common. Both wore intimidating gear. Both had intense entrances that made them look like they came straight out of a post-apocalyptic action movie. Both relied on strength, aggression, and a hard-hitting style. They were big, mean, and looked like they were ready for war. But here's where things get interesting. While it's true that Demolition was inspired by the Road Warriors, they weren't just trying to copy them. They were doing their own thing, and in some ways, they were even doing it better. The biggest difference showed up in the ring. The Road Warriors were famous for destroying teams in just a few minutes. Their matches were fast and explosive. They'd hit their signature moves, flex for the crowd, and walk out before their opponents even knew what hit them. It worked. They were exciting, powerful, and fun to watch. But Demolition had a different approach. They didn't rush. They took their time. Their matches were longer with more back-and-forth action. They used strategy. They wore their opponents down. Watching Demolition felt like watching a fight that built up slowly, like a long, painful war rather than a quick knockout. They told stories in the ring, and that gave them their own identity. As Demolition's popularity continued to rise, something unexpected and pretty amazing happened. The fans started cheering for them, loudly. At first, Demolition had been introduced as villains, the tough, scary guys you were supposed to boo. But over time, the crowd started to love them. The way they looked, the way they fought, the way they didn't back down from anyone, it all connected with people. Little by little, the boos turned into cheers. By 1989, they had fully made the switch. Demolition were now babyfaces, the good guys. And not just any good guys, they were fan favorites. Every time their entrance music hit, the arena would erupt. Fans jumped to their feet, screaming and clapping. Kids came to shows with their faces painted just like Axe and Smash. They had officially become heroes in the eyes of the crowd, and they were getting some of the loudest reactions in the company. They were in the middle of some fantastic rivalries too. They had hard-hitting matches against teams like the Twin Towers, Big Boss Man and Akeem, the Brainbusters, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and the Powers of Pain. These weren't just fun matches, they were intense battles that helped make tag team wrestling feel important and exciting. They didn't just stay popular, they kept winning too. They captured the WWF tag team titles 2 more times, including a memorable win at WrestleMania 6. For many fans, that was the peak of their run. At that point, Demolition wasn't just keeping up with the tag division, they were leading it. They had gone from being compared to the Road Warriors to stepping into their own spotlight and thriving in it. But things started to change in 1990. In the middle of that year, something major happened. Hawk and Animal, the actual Road Warriors, finally signed with the WWF. They were rebranded as the Legion of Doom, but fans knew exactly who they were. From the moment they showed up on WWF TV, the buzz was huge. The company gave them a big debut, a strong push, and tons of marketing support. It was clear that the WWF now had their eyes on a new tag team to promote. And that new team was not Demolition. Slowly but surely, Demolition began to fade into the background. They were still around, still wrestling, but they weren't the focus anymore. The matches became fewer. The wins became less frequent. The spotlight they once owned now belonged to someone else. For fans who had followed Demolition from the start, who had watched them rise, turn into heroes, and carry the tag division, it was tough to see. But this wasn't the only change. That change came with a third man, Bryan Adams, better known as Crush. When he joined Demolition, the idea was to keep the team strong. Instead, it marked the slow decline of one of WWF's most dominant tag teams. Let's rewind a bit. The original Demolition duo, Axe, played by Bill Eadie, and Smash, played by Barry Darsow, had built a reputation for being tough, brutal, and nearly unbeatable. They had multiple tag team championship reigns and were one of the most feared teams in wrestling. But while they looked unstoppable in the ring, things behind the scenes were more complicated. Around 1990, Bill started having serious health problems. He developed a dangerous allergy to shellfish, which he believed came from his many wrestling trips to Japan. This wasn't just a minor issue. He ended up in the hospital, which raised alarm bells for Vince McMahon and the WWF management. They weren't sure if Eadie could continue wrestling full-time, so they needed a way to keep Demolition alive without risking his health. The decision was made. The WWF brought in Bryan Adams and rebranded him as Crush. He had the size, the build, and the look to fit in with Demolition. He wore the same gear, painted his face, and stepped into the role quietly. Just like that, Demolition became a trio instead of a duo. They also started using what's called the Freebird rule. Named after another famous team, the Fabulous Freebirds, this rule allowed any 2 members of a 3-person group to defend the tag team titles. So Demolition could show up with any combination, Axe and Smash, Smash and Crush, or Axe and Crush. It gave the team flexibility and meant they could keep competing even if Axe wasn't feeling well. But while this setup worked logistically, it didn't sit well with everyone, especially the fans. Fans had built a strong connection with Axe and Smash. They'd been through so many battles together. People were used to seeing that duo walk down the ramp, ready to destroy anyone in their way. Then suddenly, there was a new guy. Crush looked the part, intimidating, big, with face paint. But he didn't have the same chemistry with Smash. It felt forced. Fans noticed the change right away. Some were confused, others disappointed. It was like watching your favorite band swap out a lead singer. Sure, the music might sound similar, but something about the vibe was just off. Then came SummerSlam 1990. Demolition, now made up of Smash and Crush, lost the tag team titles to the Hart Foundation. It was a tough loss, not just in the story, but also in how fans saw them. That loss marked the start of their decline. A few months later, in November, Axe made his last TV appearance at Survivor Series. Soon after, WWF President Jack Tunney announced on air that only 2 members of Demolition would be officially recognized from now on. Just like that, Axe was gone. Smash and Crush kept wrestling as a team, but the magic was gone. They were no longer top stars. Their matches felt less important, and their storylines stopped headlining shows. They slowly dropped down the card and became just another tag team. By mid-1991, it was clear things were over. Demolition had lost its identity, fan support, and relevance. The original edge, the tough reputation, and the unbeatable vibe were gone. Smash wrestled as Demolition for the last time in August. Just like that, the team that once ruled the WWF tag division was finished. Even Bill Eadie, who was being sidelined, later admitted most fans didn't really accept Crush as part of Demolition. In interviews years later, he said people would talk about Demolition like it was just him and Smash. Crush rarely came up. That says a lot. Eadie wasn't happy either. He felt he still had plenty to offer in the ring. But with his health in question, there wasn't much he could do. The company had made its decision, and he had to step back. From then on, things started to fall apart. The magic that made Demolition so special began to fade. Their new 3-man setup just didn't have the same spark. On top of that, WWF turned them into heels. That didn't help. Fans who once cheered for Demolition now didn't know what to make of them. After their run in WWE was over, things started to fall apart between the team and the company. In the early 1990s, Bill Eadie, who played Axe, and Randy Colley, who was the original Smash before Barry Darsow took over the role, filed a lawsuit against WWE, which was still called the WWF back then. They believed they deserved royalties and rights for helping to create the Demolition characters. Eadie claimed that the Demolition gimmick was something he had worked on with Vince McMahon directly. He felt there was a verbal agreement, or at least a shared understanding, that he would be rewarded for his part in building what became a very successful act. Colley also believed that, despite his short time as Smash, he had helped lay the groundwork for the team and should be compensated. Their case was based on the idea that WWE had taken their concepts and used them for profit without giving proper credit or payment. Eadie said he wanted the right to use the Demolition name outside of WWE and felt it was only fair that he get something back for all the time and creativity he had put in. WWE didn't see it that way at all. Their defense was that the contracts the wrestlers signed gave the company full control over any characters, names, or ideas developed while working there. In their view, Demolition was their property, no matter who had contributed to the idea. The legal battle stretched on for years and ended in 1997 when the court ruled in WWE's favor, created under their roofs. From that point forward, it became very clear that if a wrestler created a character while working for WWE, they had no legal ownership of it once they left. For Eadie, the loss wasn't just a matter of money. He saw it as a personal betrayal. He had expected to transition into a backstage role with WWE after retiring from wrestling. He says Vince McMahon promised him a job, possibly as a road agent or trainer. But when he stepped away from the ring in 1990, the offer never came. No job, no explanation, no call. He felt like he had been pushed aside, and that disappointment only added to his frustration with how the company had handled things. He later said that he held out from settling the lawsuit for a long time because he believed so strongly that he had been wronged. When he finally did settle, he described the amount as satisfactory, but it was clear that the emotional scars remained. That sense of betrayal would continue to shape his relationship with WWE for years. Eadie believed that Vince McMahon had gone back on his word. That belief became part of why he fought so hard and for so long. For him, it was about more than royalties. It was about respect and being treated fairly after dedicating so much of his career to helping the company succeed. Then came another legal conflict, years later, that made things even worse. In 2016, Eadie and Darsow, Axe and Smash, joined a class action lawsuit with more than 50 other former wrestlers. This lawsuit had nothing to do with character rights. It was about health, specifically brain injuries, and the long-term risks that come from years of taking hits in the ring. The group accused WWE of not doing enough to protect its performers from the dangers of head trauma and not being honest about the potential long-term effects. They brought up serious conditions like chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, dementia, and Alzheimer's, claiming that the company ignored or even covered up the risks. WWE pushed back hard. The company argued that these wrestlers had been independent contractors, not employees, and that WWE had no legal obligation to cover medical issues years after a performer left. They also said many of the claims were outdated and had no legal standing. In 2018, the case was dismissed by a U.S. district judge. For Edie and Darsow, joining the lawsuit probably made any chance of reconciling with WWE even less likely. They had already fought the company once, and now they were part of another high-profile legal battle. It put them even further on the outside. Over time, fans and experts began to see a clear pattern. Despite their accomplishments, Demolition remained left out of WWE's biggest honors. No Hall of Fame induction, no special appearances, no video packages celebrating their legacy. Many people came to believe that the reason was simple. They had taken WWE to court more than once, and the company wasn't going to forgive that easily. Bill Eadie said it plainly in a 2018 interview. He was asked why Demolition had never been inducted into the Hall of Fame. His answer was short and direct. He said he was almost certain it was because of the lawsuit. That wasn't speculation. That was his honest belief, and it lined up with everything that had happened. WWE doesn't forget legal battles, especially public ones. And when someone sues the company, the consequences can last for decades. What makes all this even harder to watch is that Demolition deserves to be honored. Their run as tag team champions stood unmatched for decades. Their look and style influenced so many teams that came after them. They helped build an era of wrestling that is still remembered fondly today. Their absence from the Hall of Fame isn't about lack of achievement. It's about bad blood. After years of being at odds with WWE, things finally seem to be changing between the company and Demolition. For a long time, their relationship was full of lawsuits, disagreements, and silence. But in early 2025, something shifted. There's a real sign the door's opening again, and this legendary tag team might finally get the respect they've deserved for decades. A lot of this change comes down to WWE's current direction and who's in charge. Paul "Triple H" Levesque has taken a bigger creative role and shown he cares about wrestling's history. He's been working on bringing back past stars and fixing cold relationships. Under his lead, WWE has put more effort into honoring legends who were once pushed aside. Back in 2024, there were early signs WWE and Demolition were at least talking again. Axe and Smash were invited to WrestleMania and the Hall of Fame ceremony. That was a big deal, considering how long they'd been kept at arm's length. They couldn't make it because of prior commitments, but the invitation itself showed WWE was ready to bury the hatchet. Then in February 2025, it became official. Reports said Bill Eadie and Barry Darsow, Axe and Smash, had signed WWE Legends contracts. That brought them back into the WWE family formally. It ended years of bad blood and gave hope they might finally be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Signing a Legends deal is more than a handshake. It's a legal contract that lets WWE use a wrestler's name, image, and likeness for merchandise, video games, appearances, and more. But it's also a sign of respect. It says, you matter to this company's history. What made this moment even more meaningful is that it wasn't just Axe and Smash. WWE also honored Bryan Adams, who played Crush, the third member of Demolition in later years. Bryan Adams passed away in 2007, but WWE reached out to his family and worked with them to include him posthumously in the Legends program. They contacted his son Royce Adams and his mother, arranging a contract recognizing Crush as part of Demolition's legacy. Royce later shared how much this meant to his family and how WWE handled everything respectfully and sincerely. This move shows WWE is taking a more thoughtful approach to honoring the past. Instead of only choosing the most popular names or the ones with clean relationships, they're giving credit to everyone who played a role. Including Crush along with Axe and Smash sends the message that WWE wants to tell the full story, not just the easy parts. That kind of inclusion means a lot to the families and the fans who followed these wrestlers for years. With the Legends deals signed, there are clear signs WWE is preparing for something bigger. One likely step is finally inducting Demolition into the Hall of Fame. Reports say they're being discussed for the 2025 class. Now that legal issues are behind them and contracts are in place, nothing stands in the way. It's not official yet, but the momentum is there. It feels like only a matter of time. On a business level, this also lets WWE use Demolition again in real ways. They can make new action figures, put the team in video games, release throwback merchandise, and tell their story in documentaries or on the WWE Network. It's a win for everyone. Axe and Smash get recognized and paid. WWE gets access to a part of its history fans still care about, and fans get to see one of their favorite teams finally in the spotlight. This is a big change from the late 90s and early 2000s. After the 1997 lawsuit, WWE won full ownership of the Demolition name and characters. The court ruled that anything created while working for WWE belonged to the company. That meant Axe and Smash couldn't use the Demolition name for big commercial purposes without WWE's approval. Still, Bill Eadie kept wrestling independently using variations of the name like Axis the Demolisher, and even teamed with others under the Demolition banner. These were mostly small shows or appearances in Japan, and WWE didn't seem to make a big legal issue of it after the court ruling. It's possible WWE let some of these appearances slide, especially if they were low-key and didn't interfere with company business. Maybe there were quiet, behind-the-scenes agreements to keep things from escalating. Eadie also owned another character, the Masked Superstar, giving him options to work independently without relying on the Demolition name. Either way, those post-lawsuit years were marked by a silent standoff between Demolition and WWE. Neither side publicly acknowledged the other much, but neither pushed for more conflict either. Demolition's journey through professional wrestling is one of those stories that sticks with you. It has everything you'd expect from a great wrestling tale. Big moments, twists and turns, backstage drama, and a final chapter that brings things full circle. When people talk about classic tag teams, Demolition doesn't always get mentioned first. Maybe it's because they were constantly compared to the Road Warriors, or maybe it's because of how their time in WWF ended. But the truth is, Demolition was one of the most dominant, exciting, and memorable tag teams of their time. The team started with Axe and Smash. Later on, a third member named Crush joined the group. From the moment they appeared on WWF television, their look and presence got people talking. With black leather outfits, face paint, and heavy entrance music, they gave off an intimidating vibe that fans couldn't ignore. Even though some people thought they were just copying the Road Warriors, Demolition quickly proved they were more than just a knockoff. They built their own identity and earned respect the hard way by delivering in the ring. They held the WWF Tag Team Championship 3 times. One of those reigns lasted a whopping 478 days, which was a record at the time. That kind of run doesn't happen by accident. It takes fan support, strong booking, and real talent. Demolition had all 3. One of the biggest turning points for them came in 1988. At that time, Demolition were villains, or heels in wrestling terms. Their manager was Mr. Fuji, a longtime figure in the business known for playing the bad guy. At Survivor Series that year, something unexpected happened. During a match, Mr. Fuji turned on Demolition. He sided with the Powers of Pain, a newer tag team. This moment shocked fans and instantly changed how they saw Demolition. Suddenly, Axe and Smash weren't the bad guys anymore. They were the ones who had been betrayed. The fans got behind them in a big way. This moment is considered one of the best examples of a double turn in wrestling history, where both teams switched roles at the same time. Demolition became the heroes, and the Powers of Pain became the villains. That babyface run, where Demolition played the good guys, ended up being the most successful period of their career. Fans loved them. They looked tough, they fought hard, and they had a cool, no-nonsense attitude that made them stand out. Their long title reign mostly happened during this era, and it's when they became one of the most popular tag teams in the WWF. But like many wrestling stories, things didn't stay on top forever. In 1990, changes started happening within the group. Bill Eadie, who played Axe, was dealing with health issues. He couldn't wrestle as much, which meant the team had to adjust. That's when a new member, Crush, was added to the group. With Crush on board, Demolition became a three-man team. This move was meant to keep the group going strong, but it also changed the dynamic. Around the same time they started turning heel again, they began using dirty tactics, and Mr. Fuji returned as their manager. The idea was that this new version of Demolition would be even more dangerous and ruthless. The problem was, the fans didn't really connect with this heel version the way they had before. The shift felt rushed, and it didn't have the same emotional impact as their previous turns. On top of that, the Legion of Doom had just arrived in WWF. Known before as the Road Warriors, they were fan favorites with a similar style and appearance. Their arrival pushed Demolition out of the spotlight. Behind the scenes, there was some frustration about how things were playing out. In later interviews, Edie shared his own ideas for how the story could have gone differently. He imagined a version where Mr. Fuji turned Smash and Crush against Axe, leading to a big breakup and eventual reunion between the original two members. It never happened that way, but his idea shows how much potential there still was in the group. Not long after these changes, Demolition's time in WWF came to an end. What followed was a long and complicated chapter in their story. After leaving the company, they didn't get much attention from WWE in the years that followed. This wasn't just about being forgotten, it was partly because of real-world legal issues. Edie and Darso, Smash, got into a legal fight with WWE over the rights to the Demolition name and character. Later, they were also part of a larger lawsuit about wrestler health and concussions. Because of these issues, Demolition wasn't invited back for special events. They didn't get included in video games or reunion shows, and they weren't inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, even though a lot of fans believed they deserved it. For years, fans spoke up about this. They pointed out how much Demolition had done for tag team wrestling, how long they held the titles, and how popular they were at their peak. People wanted to see them get the recognition they had earned. Finally, in early 2025, things started to change. WWE announced that Axe, Smash, and even Crush, through his estate since he passed away years ago, had signed WWE Legends contracts. That move sent a clear message. The company was ready to make peace. These contracts are about more than just money. They opened the door for Demolition to appear in WWE merchandise, shows, documentaries, and video games. Most importantly, they clear the way for something fans have wanted for a long time, a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame. This moment feels like closure. After everything they went through, Demolition is finally getting the respect they were owed. It shows that even after years of being on the outside, reconciliation is possible. Let us know in the comments, what's your favorite Demolition moment? Do you think they should have gone into the Hall of Fame years ago?